Hey guys, what's going on? I'm coming to you today with another Armada ship breakdown. Today is the Imperial Assault Carriers, otherwise known as the Gozanti. And so we're going to talk about this. It's a flotilla, and it's the first ship of its type, along with the GR-75. If you have already seen the Rebel GR-75 video, this is going to have a lot of similarities to that because these two are kind of like brother and sister ships, one for each faction, so there's a lot of overlap. But that being said, let's go forward. So this is a flotilla, and what that means is it's multiple ships on a single base. We see two assault carriers on a single small ship base. It does count as a small ship, but it also has this flotilla keyword. And it also has some special rules as it applies to bumping. If any time a flotilla overlaps with another ship, only the non-flotilla ships take damage. So you can't ram somebody with a flotilla, it'll only hurt yourself, unless of course it's another flotilla, in which case you'll both take damage. But if another ship rams a flotilla, only the flotilla takes damage. Again, unless of course they're both flotillas. So basically, very much want to discourage ramming with a flotilla, and that's kind of what these rules do. If we look at the Gozantis, though, they basically have 3 hull, 1 shield all around. They can shoot out the front and the sides. They have the evade and the scatter. So evade is really cool. We only see that on flotillas as far as ships. Usually it's just reserved for some elite squadrons. So evade is very great, gives it a lot of survivability. Can go up to speed 3 and is fairly maneuverable. It loses that last click, at the higher speeds, but it's really not too bad. And we've got the new fleet support upgrade slot. So the fleet support upgrade slot is cool because it gives us 5 new cards. At least there's 5 as of the time of making this video. I want to point out that Slicer Tools only comes with the Gozanti, and if you wanted repair crews, that only comes with the GR-75. But so let's talk about all the different fleet supports. I'm going to start with some of the favorites, like Bomber Command Center. Bomber Command Center is like one of the most popular there is because there's so many great bombers. This works especially good with an Imperial list because of the Reimer Ball. You're able to keep your Gozanti kind of close to your squadrons, and Bomber Command Center will allow Reimer to kind of extend the range of all of that. So it's very nice. And the idea here is you just keep a Gozanti kind of closer to the back, just in activation range, basically. Hopefully out of direct firing line of all the other ships. Whereas Reimer then allows all those ships who get the rerolls from Bomber Command Center to attack at longer range. So that's very cool. The next is CommsNet. Now, CommsNet may be the most popular fleet support upgrade altogether because it's so cheap and it's so easy to use. Basically, you just get a token and pass it off to somebody else. So it allows you really to be very selfless with CommsNet, supporting the fleet and giving the ships that really need all the extra commands, the command tokens to help them do all kinds of extra things, especially like nav or engineering or things that they maybe this other ship wants to do squadron commands all the time, and you're allowing it to do other things. Or maybe they want to do concentrate fire every time, and you're allowing them to do other things like nav as well. It's also great to be able to start stacking things on turn 1, whereas normally turn 1 is very slow and boring, so it's good for that. Next up is Slicer Tools. Again, Slicer Tools only comes with the Gozanti. Slicer Tools is great because it allows you to move and then exhaust it and mess somebody's day up by changing their top command dial. So Slicer Tools is a whole lot of fun for you, but not much fun for your opponent. The only thing that really stinks when you're using Slicer Tools and you're like, aha, I'm going to give them this command, and you flip it over and that was the command they were already going to do, and then it backfires, and then it makes you think, well, goodness, I don't want to give them anything else. So there have been times where I Slicer Tooled somebody and I'm like, I'm going to leave you with just that. I don't want you having anything else. So that's been kind of funny. Next up, we have Repair Crews. Repair Crews only comes in the GR-75, but like all upgrades that aren't faction specific, you can crisscross them. Repair Crews allows you to heal another ship. And while that's great, I don't see this one get used all that much, just because CommsNet can kind of do a similar thing by taking engineering and passing out tokens, and it's cheaper. So I really don't see Repair Crews being used all that much. And then last, but perhaps least, is Jamming Field. Jamming Field has a lot of controversy because people thought that it wasn't necessarily always on, but it is always on, as per the last FAQ. It's also takes a little bit of precision to be able to work it just right. In my view, there's kind of 2 ways to use this card, and that's one as just to keep a few defensive screen of fighters, maybe a couple of ties nearby, and help them just fend off other attackers long enough. Or the second way is the more difficult way, and that's to send your fighters in, have them attack, and then have your flotilla fly up behind them and that now protect. You know, but the thing is, it protects all the squadrons, so it hampers all squadron attacks, and it protects all the squadron defenses. So it's, you know, it's a double-edged sword. But if you move your squadrons out of range, have them attack, and then fly it back within range, then it can work. But it takes a little bit of finesse to do that. So you know, and your payoff is kind of minimal. So that's why I don't see that one used as much. Also because when you put that on your flotilla, you can't put a better one. Like if you're flying a lot of squadrons, you may want Bomber Command Center instead, you know, and so that alone is one reason why you might not see too many ships with jamming field. So this is also, I want to talk about lifeboats and what that means, because it's been a big keyword. And again, if you've already seen my last video, you've heard me talk about this already, but I want to talk about it some more because there's some really good builds to be a lifeboat with this ship. So basically what a lifeboat is when you put your commander on a flotilla and just fly it away and keep it away from the battle. Now, lifeboats were always a thing, but they've been kind of bigger lately since Wave 5 came out, because we have the relay keyword, and that allows a flotilla to still do a squadron command and activate 2 squadrons who are in the battlefield, and you get to do this from relative safety. So that makes it really, there's no risk versus reward here. There's no risk whatsoever, because the idea is you fly your flotilla completely away from all the action while you're still able to participate and contribute to that battle. So a lot of people think that that's not necessarily fair, and I can understand that mindset for certain. Relay kind of does make that, you know, kind of amplifies that capability without, you know, amplifying the risk. So I think that's a little bit unfortunate, but I'm sure eventually something's going to come out that either changes it, or I don't necessarily think a nerf, but maybe some new keywords that can jam the relay, or maybe things that just are better if you're closer. So more of an incentive to bring all your ships into the battle, and I think that's a good thing. Incentivize players to play the way that's, you know, better for the community, as opposed to just nerfing things. So that's what I'm more in favor of. But we're gonna talk about lifeboats because there's some pretty cool ways to fly this as a lifeboat. So I want to talk about the 2 different types. First, we're going to talk about the cruisers, which are only 23 points, and this is the most common version of the Gozanti, mostly because it's only 23 points. And one of the biggest, you know, reasons people will take flotillas is because they're cheap and they count as a deployment and as well as an activation. So you can really get a lot of ships in a build that otherwise might not have many. Especially if you want to fly an expensive ship like an Imperial Star Destroyer, you're going to need, you know, to fill out your list with other things. And a lot of people don't like to fly 2 and 3 ship lists. You know, a lot of times you really want to have at least 4 to ensure that you don't have to, you know, waste a Star Destroyer activation by moving it in range, and now it's going to take fire from all of your opponent's ships. So you know, that's another thing that flotillas have kind of changed the game, is because you can now put 3 or 4 or 5 flotillas in a list and still have enough points for, you know, a really powerful ship. So that's one of the things that people will do. This 23-point cruiser is the most common, and the big difference between the other ones is that this has a black anti-squadron die, otherwise known as flak, and it has blue dice all around, with the exception of the back. There's no attack out the rear, but it has blue dice on the sides and on the front. And so, you know, for 23 points, it's a little more expensive than the GR75, but it does get to shoot, and it gets to shoot a lot, and it can actually, it's not that hard for it to double arc. And granted, it's only 1 blue die, but that's like a squadron attacking. Expect a squadron with bomber, perhaps, because your crits will actually matter. And you can do a concentrated fire command, so you can potentially get 2 or even 3 blue dice if you have, you know, double arced. So it's not bad. It's got a little punch to it, but I especially like the black anti-squadron die because you have such a good chance of actually rolling a hit. So if you are able to fly this thing right into the middle of all of the enemy squadrons, and you survive long enough to be able to shoot the following turn, then you can potentially do a lot of damage that way. So let's talk about the Assault Carriers, which is the 28-point version. The Assault Carriers are a little more expensive because of a couple of things. First off, they have a red die in the front, and that is kind of a big deal for them because now they can attack at long range, and this is only flotilla that can attack that far away. If you happen to do a concentrate fire, that gives you 2 red dice out the front, and so you can actually really contribute to a battle. One time I had opening salvo going for me, and so I had 4 red dice out the front. I was actually first player. I chose it from my opponents because I had a lot of activations. But you know, and if you happen to have Vader as your commander, you could potentially get as much as 4 red dice out the front with rerolls. So that's not too bad. It can, you know, it could potentially be an awful lot of attacking. But it still has the blue dice on the sides, and it upgrades the black anti-squadron die to a blue anti-squadron die, which isn't terrible, but I'm usually a bigger fan of the black die for the better chance of a hit. The bluer die does give you more range, though, so depending on what you're going for, like maybe if you have Callus on there, you might want to have them more range and have more shots, so this way you can add a black or any other color that you want. And so that's definitely something to consider, or at least roll your blue die first. Oh, I got an accuracy against Howl Runner. Okay, well now I'll add a black since I'm pretty sure I'll get a hit in there, and she won't be able to scatter. So that's something nice that you can do if you wanted to take advantage of the extra range for the squadron die. But other than that, those two ships are very, very similar, and they're both under 30 points, which makes them very cheap. I want to talk about some builds now. So one way, if you were building a lifeboat to put your commander on, you might want to put Minister Tua on there, and then ECM, or Electronic Countermeasures. Now, one of the things that this does, Tua gives you the defensive retrofit, and that allows you to then equip ECM, which is normally used on large ships like Star Destroyers to allow them to brace even if there's an accuracy. Well, one of the biggest weaknesses for any flotilla is the accuracy to stop your scatter. And so with ECM, now you can exhaust the ECM to still scatter even if you get that huge hit. So you can afford to fly straight in the path of an Imperial Star Destroyer if you need to, or a Liberty MC-80, and take that full frontal attack. It doesn't matter if they roll accuracies or not, because you know you have ECM. You could just tap, exhaust that, and then tap your scatter and flip it over, and then get out of there next turn. So that's very, very cool to help you, because sometimes you'll just get that unlucky hit, and then there's no hope for you. So that's a pretty cool way to keep your commander alive. And what I like about that too is this is a type of lifeboat that's not going to skirt the edge of the battlefield. This is a type of lifeboat that would be in the battle. And I prefer to have my ships participate in the battle. I don't like sending somebody away. That's not my play style. But I don't usually play win at all costs. I usually like to have a good time, and I would rather have a more fun and interesting game than one that it's boring but I win. But that's me. So let's talk about some other builds. How about Flight Commanders and Rapid Launch Bay, and then let's also toss on Bomber Command Center. So now, Flight Commander is one of my favorites, especially when compared with Rapid Launch Bay, because I can move and then do my squadron command afterwards. This allows me to potentially be up to speed 3, or whatever my speed is, move to be at close range of an enemy ship, then drop some squadrons that I had put on me and have them attack. And if they're bomber, well, now they can attack and now also get rerolls, so they can guarantee that I can get some damage done, and that's just great. So that kind of turns a flotilla into a miniature version of a demolisher. This is a nice way to do it, although it's almost a death sentence for the flotilla. But so you'd have to be very careful about where and when you do it. It's great if you have a lot of activations, so you can potentially get a last in, first out type of scenario. So you activate last, but you're also first player. So this way you could drop your squadrons, and then next turn activate squadron command again, have them attack again, and then fly to safety. So that's kind of one way to do something like that. Only problem is if you get too far out of safety, then the Bomber Command Center might not work. So it's possible to do this without Bomber Command Center, or maybe you'll just go with something, some squadrons that don't really need the rerolls as much, like Merrick Steel. So that's an option. So you can do that. Well, let's talk about Chirano. Chirano plus Expanded Hangar Bay. Now here's a pretty cool way, especially if you're running relay, but you don't have to be running relay. But Chirano's a great guy that allows you to not really need intel quite so much, and he actually combos with some of the titles that I'm going to talk about later on too. But I have run Chirano before, and I do really like him, especially with relay. Because it allows me to not have to rely on intel at all. And Expanded Hangar Bay allows me to activate just one more, so it makes Chirano hit 3 people instead of 2 people. So that's pretty nice. But there's another thing I did recently in a small ship tournament. I did a video on it, but I want to mention it here as well because it was fun, is that I put the Phylon tractor beams on all of my Gozantis, and I gave them slicer tools as well. And so that's a pretty cool combo, because now a Phylon can go on there because they have the offensive retrofit. A lot of people don't really think about that. And so many of the ships that are very, very popular today are small ships, so you can potentially slow down small ships, and then after you move, slicer them to stop them from speeding back up if they had a nav planned. So it's a great way to, some people, that was one of the problems with the tractor beams when they first came out, is I was a little underwhelmed, but they seemed cool on the surface, but I was a little underwhelmed because people would just plan nav each turn, and they'd be like, fine, you can slow me down, I'll just speed back up and get an extra yaw. And so this will kind of stop that. And another thing that this does is this shuts down a demolisher. You can also put Director Isard on there too to kind of help you get a better choice of which way you want to move. Because when you're moving, you might say, you might be in a position where I could go this way or that way. Who do I want to slicer? And you know, this way it'll allow you to do that. So that's kind of cool. And it would really mess with somebody running a demolisher, because they're going to need to be able to do that. You know, that extra nav, and if you change them to like a squadron command or something, they're, you know, because so many demolishers run engine text, they need the nav token or the nav command. So that's a pretty nasty way to mess with people. All right, so I want to talk about some titles now. First thing is I want to talk about the Vector title. Now the Vector title is very cool. It's only got a speed, a cost of 2, but what it allows is when you do a squadron command, it increases the speed of any squadrons without heavy by 1 that you're activating. And so that's, you know, why is that such a big deal? Well, on its own, it's not that big of a deal, because almost every Imperial squadron without heavy is already speed 4 or 5. So, like, yes, TIE fighters can go from speed 4 to 5, and that's okay, but that's not that big of a deal, because speed 4 is still really, really far. It's a little bit of a big deal, but it's not that big of a deal where you need to put a special title on there, because my TIE fighters have to go speed 5. But now there are ships that don't have heavy that could take advantage of this. There's some ships that are speed 3, but most of those already have rogue, and so they don't need to be activated by a ship. And so this was when this title first came out, I was thinking to myself, it's not that great. But one of the things that I've done recently is I paired this with Chirano and expanded Hangar Bay. And so now, if they're engaged, Chirano treats them as a printed speed of 2, and then Vector then supersedes and increases that by 1 for up to 3, and now that makes it kind of a big deal, especially if you've got your lambdas with strategic on there, because they have relay, so they could be anywhere. But strategic also, if they need to get to that objective, they can get to that objective and then move the objective token. So Vector is pretty cool for, you know, if you're not relying on intel and you're going to use like that Chirano combo. So that's something to you know, one way to use that title. I personally kind of like it. And let's also talk about the suppressor. The suppressor costs 4, and this really is an all-purpose title. And what it does is basically whenever an enemy ship ends its activation at distance 1 to 3 of you, you can choose and exhaust one of their defense tokens. Now this pairs really well, obviously, with the ISD title Avenger. So, you know, you've only got 1 brace? Okay, well, we'll exhaust your brace, and now when my ISD shoots, you won't be able to brace because you can't spend exhausted tokens. So that's always a really nice combo, but it's just good for anyway, because it makes somebody not want to move near you. And that's one of your weaknesses as a flotilla, is that when people get close to you, they can potentially kill you next turn because they're going to have the blue dice, or, you know, they're going to be able to get those accuracies. So it's a way to kind of keep people away, and that's one thing you really like. It's people usually don't knowingly just fly there, but you know, sometimes you can put yourself in a position where they have no choice. So it's just a fun title, and 4 points isn't too much, although it's a little expensive. So sometimes I use it, sometimes I don't, but I do love this title. All right, so next I want to talk about commanders. Now the commanders I'm going to talk about here are based on how they affect the flotillas, how they affect the Gozantis, and how good they would be as far as helping the Gozantis kind of accomplish their mission. So this is going to be ranked in order of, you know, how they apply to a Gozanti, and not necessarily how good they are overall. So at the bottom of my list I have Screed, and this is just because Screed, you know, it doesn't do anything for this ship. They've only got 1 attack die anyway, so it's virtually impossible that they would ever actually need to use Screed. It would have to be some kind of crazy scenario, and he just really doesn't do anything for them. Next up is Jerjerrod. Jerjerrod doesn't want to do much for this ship either, because for one, it's so weak. They've only got 1 shield all around and only 3 hull, so they're the weakest ship. They don't want to take any damage that they don't have to. So first off, they're not going to want to take the damage from Jerjerrod. Second of all, they don't really need that extra yaw at speed 1, because they've already got yaw everywhere at speed 1. So he really doesn't do very much for this ship. I mean, he's great, but he just doesn't do much for this ship. Next up is Tarkin. Tarkin doesn't do a whole lot for any Command 1 ship, because he's already giving out, you know, they can always take a token turn 1 anyway. And usually, I mean, I understand there's, oh, well, if you have a token from Tarkin, now you can afford to do other things on turn 1, but that's almost always what I end up doing on turn 1, is just taking a token and preparing to do what I need to do. And and then Tarkin just is kind of counter to that, so he doesn't give them very much, and that's just a given for a command 1 ship. Tarkin kind of usually wants ships that have command 3, and that's kind of the best thing for Tarkin. Next up is Constantine. Now, I know what you're thinking. Crabbok, this is a small ship. Constantine only works with medium or large ships. Absolutely, that's true. That's true. But the reason I put Constantine a little bit higher on this list is because while this ship doesn't actually allow him to trigger, the role of this ship and so many of the ways that you can configure this ship directly support a Constantine fleet. And that I felt it would be wrong for me to leave Constantine too low. The mission of this ship synergizes very well with Constantine. So, for example, slicer tools. If you're flying Constantine and you've got a bunch of other ships that are large or medium, and you're slowing down all the other ships to bring them in. Maybe you've got a whole bunch of Vic 1s, right? Well, naturally they're going to try to speed up to get past your Constantine effect. So slicer tools will allow you to counter that and to allow Constantine to work a little bit more. Or maybe Phylon, because like I already told you, you could use Phylons on here, the tractor beam. So maybe you'll want to run that, and then Constantine, same basic thing. You can run both. You can do Phylons and slicer tools. Or the suppressor title also, it's just really nice. It really just it seems like it's almost built for a Constantine kind of fleet. So the suppressor is really nice. You slow them down enough, every turn they're gonna be hitting, within that range, and they might not be able to ever get out of the suppressor's range. So and also when you're running that many big ships, you still want to have a lot of extra activations. So the fact that this is, you can get one of these out there for 23 points, it really fits into a whole build that's gonna run Constantine. So this ship supports the Constantine mission, while not being able to be one of the medium or large ships themselves. So that's why I put it in the middle. Constantine does like what this ship can do for the rest of his ships. Next up is Vader. Vader, is situational, but situationally can be really, really good. And you may disagree with me, and that's okay, because I get that it's, and it kind of boils down to how I play it. Constantine seems to synergize a little bit better, but Constantine's much worse of a commander right now, and so Vader will be able to work every turn on these guys. For one, they can attack, and with only 1 die, especially if you really need that damage to go through, with only 1 die, if you roll the accuracy, if it's a blue die and you roll the accuracy, well, then it's a waste. Well, no problem. I mean, I know, and you only have 2, so I'm almost countering myself here, because you don't have that many tokens to spend, but when you need it, it's amazing. And the reason I like Vader so much for this ship is because it really opens up and makes viable the concentrate fire command. Because now I can roll, if I'm running the 28, the assault cruisers, or even either version, I can roll 2 dice at you in a single attack, and I can afford to mitigate those dice, so I can make them both count. I can make sure that there's no, I can virtually make sure that there's no blanks in those 2 dice that I throw. So I really like Vader for this ship because of the surprise factor, and people generally don't expect flotillas to become much of a threat as far as ship-to-ship combat. And Vader, because you can have so many of them. You imagine running like 10 Gozanti Assault Carriers with Vader, all doing concentrate fire commands. Right? I mean, I've talked about those on the forums before, and there is a hard counter to that, and that's with somebody running Aaron Kraken. But Vader with just 2 dice, 2 dice, 2 dice, 2 dice, 2 dice. Everyone is, the blanks and stuff get re-rolled. That's going to be really nasty. I would never run that many. I only have 4 or 3 Gozantis right now, but still, running 3 Gozantis, that's a lot of extra. That's 2 dice, 2 dice, 2 dice. And all for less than the price of 1 ship, or one victory. But so it's a way for you to squeeze a lot of extra damage out there, and I tend to think of it as almost like 2 different bombers attacking, because you can get 2 dice and you can mitigate those dice. The crits count. He's all right. I like Vader with it, especially because if somebody happens to have opening salvo, it really makes it much better. Of course, you can't plan on somebody having that, but I always bring it. When I run a bunch of Gozantis, I always bring opening salvo, because I love to have like 7 activations and get opening salvo, and just, it's wonderful. But that's really just my opinion. Vader probably should be ranked a little bit lower, but I have so much fun with him and flying Gozantis that I had to place him a little bit higher than he probably ought to have been. But now we're in the top 3. Ozzel. Ozzel is very good for this ship because of some of the... For one, it has up to speed 3, so it has a lot of different speeds it can be at, so that works with Ozzel. But also it has a lot of things that might want to take advantage of the fact that it can surprise you and speed up really quick. I talked about using rapid launch bays with this ship and Flight Commander. Well, maybe I'm at speed 1. Now I spend a nav token, and I reveal a squadron command, spend a nav token, speed all the way up to 3. Oh, you didn't think I could get that far, and then boom, now I drop all those squadrons. Surprise, surprise. Or slicer tools. Oh, I really need to get this guy. Okay, boom. Or I know I've got you. I need to slow back down so I can slicer you again every turn. Ozzel really works well with slicer tools. So it would be a great way to fly it and really kind of take advantage of some of those movement shenanigans. Next up is Tag. Tag is really good for this ship because you're probably going to lose your scatter if you're staying alive. So, you can potentially lose it early. A lot of times you won't necessarily lose it by turn 3. But you could. This is one ship you totally could. And it also allows you to kind of get your ships into the battle without having to be super afraid of losing them. So if you happen to get shot twice in the same turn on turn 3, no problem, you're going to get it right back. And so this almost can discourage people from taking shots at your Gozanti, which is fine also because no problem there. So Tag is very good for a ship with only 2 defense tokens. And at the top of the list is Mahdi. You could argue that Tag is better for them than Mahdi, but I think Mahdi is just so universally good. Many would say he's the best commander because he's cheap, he gives a bonus to everything, and he's just fantastic. And in this particular ship, he only gives 1 extra hull, but this ship only has 3 hull to begin with, so it's like it brings him up to 4 hull. That's a 33% increase in hull. That's huge for a ship that can hardly take any shots. And so a lot of times there's so many, especially because people will ram you, and this allows you just to have so much more survivability. Never has 1 extra hull been so important on a ship before. So this is huge. Mahdi is fantastic for this ship. Not only that, but he's definitely going to help everything else you've got. I just love him on a Gozanti. And that's all the commanders. So this has been the Gozanti ship breakdown. Let me know what you think, guys. Leave me in the comments below what maybe you disagree with, or if I left out any really cool combinations that you like to run with your Gozantis. And as always, guys, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't already, please subscribe and click the little bell to get alerts whenever I publish new stuff. You will see that in your inbox. And thank you so much for watching, guys. As always, have a great day.